Echa yuxatini, Yachana. Cheesh hati ati, Yach. Tlingit tu, Yachana. Eshkashnik Yéil Katu Káak. Die oude shukwa aye dati jikachtuni. Shukwa aya adati jichwani. Gosh. Ich tausend kak dachadushu owe Yao Sakha Verb. Jin kar kadak untak shu hichen. Kechne ka choy nakain jichwani. Ka atlein a. Atlein kuu og ehasuti. Ye awe akatsu adati jichwani. Kingisti tin. Jitlai aya ka ichwashatu. Yata jishugushkashnik. Aukta aya dak kastu achch Yao Sakha Jimmy C. Johnson Káak adakho yechwaji kol angun jadechat no aga awe tu yejachwane adat ajawe wuchin yejagachtine wishkalnik Yéil adekhut zati Yewacht was sagui saku Gudachsa we Yéil Gudachsa Gunalchish great to see everybody. We are going to start working. That would start with the story, Yéil Katu Káak, and I'll give you folks a little background. It was recorded in Yangon by, hold on, let me look up their Tlingit names real fast. I should have them memorized by now. Hold on. There they are. Nats Tla, Jillian Story, and Chachukwa, Constance Nash. They did a lot of great work. They recorded this in 1963 with Jimmy C. Johnson. I think Coach Ish might be another. No, maybe not. Aukta Dakasatu Achch is his Tlingit name. And I first worked on this story in 2007 when I was a student at UAS, finishing up my bachelor's degree, which started in 1993. Took me 14 years. No biggie. And it was fun. It was a really fun. There's a section in here that we'll talk about. I named one of my kids after something in this story. Maybe you'll find it. And it just really stuck with me. It was fun. There were some elders in the room. There's some elders on the phone on Sitka. And we just listen to chunks of it and then just write it down and translate it. So here we are, 14 years later, checking it out. And so I worked on it again when I went over it with Kingisti, David Katzik, in one of my classes. And then worked on it again a little bit more, just sort of fine-tuning some things. Probably still find some things. So I thought we'll go through and we're just going to look at it. This is fun. This is fun work. So I'd asked you folks to do what you could on your own, and then I opened the door to work together. And I'm not trying to say don't work together. Every now and then I'm just saying, like, see what you could do and then start doing stuff, and then we'll all do it together. And there's no pressure. Like, so this is part of our work, but, you know, we'll just see what we can do. So maybe we'll go kind of about one sentence at a time here, and then we'll just see what we came up with. And I'll fill in on the right kind of roughly what we're getting at here. Anybody want to read this first sentence?
Yeah, you dat.
Oh, all the way to the period down here, sorry.
Oh. Yeah, you dat. Ade did clock ye, ade did clock ye, ya you dat shukat. Ha in ade did clock ye.
Sheesh. And what did you folks come up with here? What do we got?
Right now.
Now? Yeah, maybe like right now, I might say. Just with the ya. The ya just makes a little bit more from now to right now.
It's Jackie. Hi.
Day to clock, yeah.
And from long ago?
Well, there is long ago. There was a clock that's long ago.
The way
Káak.
people tell it.
Say it again?
The way people tell it.
Yeah, the way people tell. And we're going to fill it in, but if you folks have any questions, you just let me know and we'll jump in. We'll look up how this stuff works.
Recording in progress.
Okay, so the way people tell. Oops, I don't know why I did that one. Okay. And now this one. Outdated clock, yeah, you did.
Just repeating themselves.
Yeah, so you could say the way people tell it right now. Right, so then he's putting it together. And then there's different ways to translate du clock, right? So one is people tell it, or it is told. Either one is totally fine. Let's just check out this verb real quick. So we're going to look up this Káak verb. I'm going to start us in the Verb Dictionary. Ooh, something open called report panic. That doesn't sound good. I'll just ignore the panic. Panic on your own time, computer. So here's the TL. So again, they go E, A, O, A. That's their order of vowels. And then we go down and we get Káak. So this is the one right here. To tell or to recount and narrate usually some ancient story. That's what I would say. It's more like an ancient story. Maybe a little bit more than like fairy tale or legend, but you know, it's fine. So if we just want to go look at any examples of this, we'll go look up tell, because you know, again, just to sort of clarify, when we look up something, we see clock and we see tell, recount, narrate, whatever is underlined, that's showing us how we can go look it up in English. So we'll go look up tell and see what we get. So here's so a kawanik is how you'd usually say that in the third person perfective. That's to tell information, facts. They told me this information. Skautlenik would be they were telling stories. A kautlenik would be they told me the story of it. Right? So there's a few different things. One, classifier change is pushing it from information to stories. Two, with the object there, it's the story of it. So like, oh yeah, they told me the story of Raven and the Fog Woman. That would be this one. Just telling stories would be this plus D. And reflexive, which is really interesting because it's kind of technically saying told stories to themselves or of themselves. I don't know. It's very interesting to think about that. And then so here we get Káak, and so Káak owe ye to Káak. But there's a couple of things like they weren't particularly great with catching short tone and low tone. So you just got to get used to that. Most of the time when you say duh as a oh, sheesh. Am I back? Am I still frozen? Okay. Okay, so here we go. Try this again. Don't know where I left off. Don't know what's going on. Don't know what's going to happen. So a lot of things with the Tlingit Verb Dictionary is a lot of things that are written long, like especially the fourth person, de, that should always be short. So that should not be D-O-O. So there's just a couple of things we'll have to go in. Du Káak, Yéil du Káak. So yeah, so they, long ago, this legend would be told. Okay, and so let's just check it out and see if it's in Carrie's verb database. We'll just check it out, see if it's in there. Just get to know this verb a little bit more. Let me zoom these guys in. So here's Káak, tell a legend. So here it is. And so you see here you can have kun, which is a contraction. We're going to look at this, but this is Káin. That's where it comes from. So you can say Káin or kun. This is one of those cannot, can't thing where you can take your pick. And so a Káaknúch, so this could be du Káak, this could be Káak. So we see there's also an object on there, right? So that does matter because for the third person, you're going to have the right there. Yeah, okay.
What about the de? Why is it de Káak?
So that's people doing. So when we get the fourth person here, so this is people do this. In this case, ade du Káak ye, the way people tell it. And there is an object on there, right? So the ade ye, it makes it into the way the verb is happening. Du Káak, you can't see the object, but it is there. There's quite a few of these verbs that kind of work like this, where there's an object there, but a lot of times it kind of disappears. And then it repeats itself. Oops, what about shukat?
Before?
Before, it could mean before. So like ach shukat, ish shukat, du shukat, like those things would work with for. Then, hold on, let me look it up real quick. Make sure it's in this one.
The time before, okay.
Yeah, so like before, and then I would say when it's just sort of like used, so this is one of those words where a lot of times there's something in front of it. So you say like ach shukat, before me, ha shukat, before us, ashukat, before it. But when it's just sort of on its own, I think of it as like before, or sometimes even original. So we'll say before. Shukat ku'u is the way we say indigenous peoples. So shukat ku'u, the before people or original people. Okay. And then we get another, there's a bit of a repeat. So here it is, the way people tell it. But then we add ha'in. And what does that do?
Like all of them.
Say it again.
Ha'in, isn't that like everybody together?
Well, wuchin would be together.
Oh, right. Ha'in is just everybody.
Well, what is ha? Like if I say ha ani,
Our.
So ha'in is with us. We're gonna look at ha'in,
Oh.
ha'in and kun, ach'in.
Oh.
There's quite a few verbs where it's like the object is the thing, like the story, the thing being talked about, the thing being said, and then so this part becomes what we call an indirect object. It's bounced out in front of the verb. So technically, like our, with, way it is told. So in this, what you do then is I would say the way it is told to us.
Okay. I made that mistake. I should have thought of that Wushin Kananik talking with us.
Yeah, yeah. So well,
Talking with me. Yeah.
ha'in kananik is going to be tell us, but then I'd say wuch in kanachtunik. Let's tell it to each other.
Mm.
Or, you know, wuch in
Mm.
kanachtunik. Let's tell stories to each other. I'll tell you a story, you tell me. And so that's a neat hortative to say something like that. Wuch in kanachtunik. Let's tell stories together. Okay. Okay. Let's see. Well, this one's getting, I'm gonna shrink up these lines a little bit. I made them kind of big so that you'd have some room to write in case anybody's still like kind of writing by hand or anything. So make these a little bit smaller. We got kind of a long one here. Anybody wanna take a shot and read this one?
Sure. Yayek yu tuwasagu at awe. Ye tuwasagu ka it awe shliha. You kissed, oh, excuse me. You kit cook egg. You that's the first time I ever said that word, as you probably noticed. You kits cook egg.
It's a long name. And I remember we're in this class, and Richard Downhauer said, well, that's kind of a tough name to say. And Laura's like, it's Káak. It's not hard. It's Káak. And we're like, but
Super.
so you guys know Yuchayatunk, right? So you see this U popping up sometimes before a verb. So we're gonna break this one down a little bit. Maybe I'm gonna run out of room, so I'm gonna do it over here. So I'm not writing the English. There's another word that's contracted here, which is keys. Anybody know what keys is? It's okay if we don't know.
Bracelet.
That would be keys. So, but now we put this underline on here and this apostrophe here.
Is it
Sea
seagull?
urchin?
Nope and no. These are good. It has to do with the ocean.
Tide.
It's the tide, right? So this comes up. So just generally saying the tide, keys. That's the tide going up, tide going down. Not like the waves, not anything. It's just the tide. So then we get a couple of parts, right? So, and this is all built into the verb. So I'm going to use hyphens. There are a couple of parts that go on in here. So you get one of these, you get one of those, you get one of these. There's a verb root. And I'm going to tell you, so there's a K on here. So we take that K off, and this verb root is actually going to change.
Oh.
It's ka. Okay. So there are some verbs with U in front of it, K at the end, right? So this is why you say yukatungi, that K turns to a G, right? What this structure is doing is saying it happens on a regular basis. Yuchayatunk, they are talking. Yuchatungi. speech, talking, language. So this verb, ka wu ka, means to command somebody or something. So you qis, which this shortens and flattens, you qits ka u ka, and then this becomes káak. But this might help us remember this name. It's the tide commander. This is the first name of the moon. It's going way back. It's complicated because then there's also the moon, and that it's
That's
don't.
amazing.
This is a name still used the Taktain Tan.
So
My
we
question
had it
is-
as the we had it as the excuse me, I'm gonna sneeze.
Oh, okay.
Raven's uncle who controls the tides
Yes,
/ moon.
100%. This is Raven's uncle who controls the
Oh.
tides.
Now, was this a thing? Like, did they understand the tide came from the moon, or was this predates the understanding of the moon controlling the tides?
They know that the moon controls the tide, and that's why the moon is called the tide controller. There are versions of this story.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing.
There's versions that start out where, like Frank could tell you, the oldest recorded version that we have of this story, he starts out by saying, that moon, it used to be on the earth. And then he goes through and talks about all this other stuff.
Wow.
Yeah. Okay, so we got, but in this, even though we have translated it as a story, we're just gonna leave that as the name. That's that person's name, okay? So backing up a little bit, Yéil, what do we got there?
Raven.
Yeah,
Raven.
so in this, there's probably some different ways to handle this. Maybe the raven, right? A lot of times you can see Yéil or Yéil, and they're talking about capital R, capital Y, trickster raven, okay?
So
Go ahead.
so we said this Raven.
That's
Is
totally
that not right?
That's totally fine.
Okay.
Okay, so some of these things, there's multiple, so we are interpreting and we are interpreters. There's going to be, sometimes going to be multiple ways that we could say this. You could say the way people tell it. You could say the way it's told. Neither of those things are incorrect. They're both correct. This raven, the raven, we've got some different ways to take care of that. Okay, so you too was saguat. What about that one?
Something about
Things we call
naming.
that? Oh, go ahead.
I was wondering if something about naming stuff. No.
Yeah, so the naming is in there.
Things we call that?
Yeah, the thing. So I would say the thing we call, and so as far as like line by line translation and sort of going back around, you know, so like you too wasaguat, the thing we call the raven, right? So there's ways to sort of go about this in terms of, but we call, so this, there's a couple things here. Like we know you do a sock, right? We know that. You do a sock, you do a sock, you hut do a sock, you it do a sock. There's the d in there. People call it this. But that could change to t. That's what we call it, right? The other thing is putting this suffix on there. So it goes from you to a sock to you to a sagu. This is kind of making the verb into an adjective. The thing that we call you to a sagu at, you do a sagu at aya yak, the thing people call boat. Getting a little fancy with the words, but that's what storytelling is all about. Awe, there's 100 ways you could translate this one. You could skip it. You could say that is. You could say that. Let me tell you just generally how awe usually works when it's on its own like this. It just gives you a little separation between your thoughts. So usually this is signaling, and this is how, oops, maybe I froze. Usually this is signaling that there's just a little pause. We're going to shift to something else maybe, right? And so, Yéil Sakha Káak. What about that one? Let's just like one chunk at a time. So now we went from tuwasagu, at, to duwasagu, ka. We also went from you to ye. We'll go through all those things.
So that's what they called him?
Yeah, so well, in this case, so we have this thing. So at is something. This thing called raven. This person that is called, right? And so this was the thing we call raven, this person that's called. And now the you means the name came right before it. The ye means the name is coming up. That's just how those work, you and ye. Old school, that's how it, now they're almost a little bit interchangeable, but technically you'll say you, that's how you do that thing. The name's coming later, switch it to ye. Coming right after the name, use you. Okay, this man that is called, or person, whatever. Yachisku Káak, so we're gonna jump ahead to that a little bit. The word order is, right, Tlingit can just kind of move those words all around. Now we get another awe, just a little separation, we're not gonna worry about it. What about Shtutlaha?
We had sent himself to the people, because that's how they called the one who sent himself to the people.
Yep. So Shtutlaha. So there is a verb here. I was just catching up with the chat a little bit. Yes, there are several versions of this story. In one of this, well, I don't know about going to the moon to get their wife back, but there's another version where there's this Yachisku Káak has a wife. So I know that. So let's just look up this ha verb and go see what we could find. So we'll go down to ha. There's a whole, that's one of those verbs, ha and ti. There's like seems like almost half the verbs are under those verb roots. There's lots of them. But I would say because there's actually a couple different ha's, right? So the way you start looking for these is one, these will usually be organized by 0 classifier, S classifier, L classifier, then SH. Then they're going to say, oh, well, what about thematics? So then they'll say, oh, well, you put ka on it. Then they'll go ka 0 plus D, ka S, ka L plus D. And it's going to sort of keep going in that order. It's going to, the classifiers, it's organized by classifier. So then we can skip down a little bit and look for j. So then we see j. And we're actually going to look, we're going to see this one, to send for or to order, right? So this is the verb. And we'll come back and look at it in a second, but let's just look up for send for and see what we find. So we got sending something by mail. We've got sending on a mission. So this is the one for the tide commander as well. And then we get send or order for. So Káak hat a juhlaha. So he sent for a chicken. It's a great sample sentence there. And so this is kind of, you're sending someone to go get it, right? That's what a lot of times this verb would be used for, is you're sending someone to go get it, you're ordering it from them, they're gonna go pick it up for you. So what does get pretty interesting when you get into this story is the SH here, like I would, let me put these, drop these down the same line. Shtutlaha is to send yourself somewhere. Now this is used quite a bit in the Raven stories. It's like, and Raven does a bunch of stuff that we don't really understand, right? He's like, well, I better send myself over there to go make sure something happens. But our context could be like, well, I didn't really want to go get it, so I made myself go get it. It could be something like that. I sent myself over there. Okay. Okay. That's page 1, or lines 1 through 10. And we're going to get a lot of repetition. Anybody want to read this sentence?
I will.
Sheesh.
You kiss cake, you do a sock, you ka away, she jutlicha away.
Sheesh. So let's get this line. What do we got for this line? Like most of the pieces we've seen already.
Yeah, that's the name, the tie changer. That's the one they call. Just use. That's how they call the one.
You could say something like that. Again, there's this. It's not like this is the only way. Like translation and interpreting, like it's a whole new world. Like there's so much to it. You know, I really like to say interpret. I got that idea from Bessie Cooley because she said, because we make so many decisions about how to say the thing, switching it over to English, because English talks about it differently, you know, and the word orders. So there's just a bunch of decisions we make. And then at away shoot laha. So there he is. So the other thing too is Raven was the first one mentioned. So we can guess that Raven's doing everything that they're talking about. Raven sent himself to this person. Raven sent himself there. In this case, the at is there. And so he sent himself there. Okay, whoops. And ask questions if you got them. We're just gonna keep rolling through.
Yeah, we had, and I totally agree with you, obviously, but somehow we couldn't get there, so we had the things people sent for. We were having difficulty with that, you know, the whole context of the sent for.
Right.
But you've solved that for us.
Yeah. So and what takes care of it is the shtut laha. He sent himself, and there's no suffix on this, and
Yeah,
it's very tricky to tell because ut is something, but there's another ut which is to arrive somewhere, and there's another ut which means to go around somewhere. It's really hard to tell which one it is. And so a lot of times, like, it was the elders who told it to us because we're like, okay, but you know, you kind of get it through context quite a bit. If he was just sending himself to go walk around, there would be, this would go low, right? So this means to arrive somewhere, to arrive there. Okay. Somebody read this one.
Cut. Away, dudlak, you kiss cake, dudlak.
Jeez. And what do we got for that? as far as oratory goes, the there's different ways to put that down. You say, that was it. There it was. There's a few different ways. It's one of those ones where it might depend on what comes after. But aweh and aweh, they are things that you sort of like look at and maybe come back to and fill in, because they're sort of just gap fillers a little bit, pace setters. Aweh. It just helps. It sounds very Tlingit when you start throwing those things in there. But you're sort of saying, okay, pay attention to this thing. And then that's kind of what you're communicating with that. What about dudlak, yukiskukek, dudlak?
His uncle.
His sister.
Yes. So dlak is a male's sister. So right away, this is one where like there's no gender in that pronoun. We're going to use his a lot because Raven is a male and Yachiskukek is a male. So we're going to put that in there. Technically, that do is just there, but Glock is a male's sister. And then, so here, if I were to do something for publishing, I would probably do something like that. Just so I try not to do Yachiskukeks and put like an apostrophe S on there, but there's nothing wrong with that. Or you could say the sister of Yachiskukek. There's different ways, right? There's different ways to do it. And so maybe we'll say there was. And we'll just, that's not a technical, like that's not what that means, but just sort of like, there's some fill in the blank stuff we end up doing. And there's debates about how much of this goes line by line, right? And then we see this storyteller repeat, repeat, repeat. Okay. How about this one?
Awe duyadi, awe klekiakia, kunagene awe, kleyu, yukiskukek, dudaki kudzati.
Sheesh. Okay. So let's take it up to the awe, right? So we got these awe, and we see how they're awe, do yadi awe, klay yach yakonashkeni awe, klay yu yukiskokek, dudachi kutzati. So this, it's a real like pace setter, the awe. You get a master like when to drop them in there, because you see 3 of them right in this line right here, right? So what are we getting out of this part right here?
When our child is getting tall.
Yeah. So the kle puts us in the when business, then or when, depending on how it's being used. So do yadi, and like this is really interesting, right? Because the way the third person is used, aweh dudlak. The other thing this is doing is saying, now we're talking about this person. Tlingit does these things to tell you who we're talking about. And it's very subtle, and you got to learn how to interpret that and also to use it. Because now, even though we start saying, just saying, that's who she is. This is who she is. Her child. When yach or yun can pop up before a verb and it means to completion. So you could say ye jechwane, I worked. Yun ye jechwane, I'm done working. You could say adat ye jechwane, I worked on it. Adat yun ye jechwane, I finished working on it. Like I'm done with that thing, right? So that's what the yach is. But it's also saying yakunashkeni. So he's getting to be that big. Really is technically like, so the ya and the na, those combine to be like it's in this process of happening. So when her child was getting big enough or grown enough, right?
Sorry, could you please repeat the explanation where you said ya plus one other thing makes it in the process of happening?
Yes. So here's the ya in front of the verb. In the prefix, you will get na. So that's why you say yanasquain. That's for a student, or yanasquaini, right? So yanagut, yanashich, yanakuch, all of that, we've heard them in those forms. Ya plus na. But you can get this little extra bonus thing. An open root with ya, na must close. So that's why you get an N right here. Because this would be, you could say, it's this big. Or you go like this, it's this tall, right? So like you'd say, my son, he's now this big, right? When he's getting to be full grown, right? And so the I on the end is also doing like when this thing is happening, right? Especially when you have kle. Kle, verby, when that verb is happening. Mm-hmm. So then this yukiskokek, let's keep copying his name. I guess I'd say that.
We looked up dahi. Is that like a canoe that's being made under construction?
Yeah. So like, and then kudzati is to exist. So there's different ways, right? Like you could technically say his unfinished canoe existed. Sounds a little broken in English. So you could say there was this unfinished canoe of his. You could say he had this unfinished canoe, right? So the kudzati just means it exists. Right? So it's really interesting the way that this construction here would be like when this thing was happening, this other thing happened, right? It could totally set us up for that. So we could say as her child was getting big enough, he had this unfinished canoe, or it was there. You know, there's different ways to interpret that. Oops, I'll probably put that. So I want to read that one. Oops. Sheesh. So we got this U thing with a K ending, right? We just sort of start looking for these patterns. They can sometimes help us see what's going to come. What do we got?
We can figure it out. We just said just inside, but we couldn't figure out Yukuanak.
Okay. Let's go see. So we'll start with the Verb Dictionary. I just like to start, when I'm doing translation work, that's usually one of the first places I go. Just I'm familiar with it. I can look stuff up pretty fast. So I'm going to go to the ends because, you know, aku, would knock, we should be able to hear, right? Where that verb root is. I'll look for knock and see if there's something there. to lose feeling, to become a habit. You know, that seems like the right kind of form with a ka and a ya in there. But what if I looked up na? So we got to be damp. Maybe it's that one, right? Because the U in front of it with the K at the end. They quite often change the to an A verb. I should expect that, but think it's always going to give you like, it's all curveballs. It's all. So we'll look up order and see what's there, right? There's give as well, but order seems to fit the kind of the story here. So we'll start it from P and go backwards. So at giving instructions, chikawa give orders to do work, kawana nechte kauduwana at yitki. The children are ordered to go home. Chushchudach has akaudana. They ordered them to go out from among them. Chushchudach has akaudana. That's a little bit of an awkward translation. I would say it's hard to say which one's plural. It could be all of them. They were ordered to disperse, get away from each other. Chushchudach. So chush is like to the self. Chushchuch, you're by yourself. I guess, yeah, chushchudach hasakautana. Yeah. Anyway, so it would be this one, kaudana, to order, to send somewhere, which is interesting, right? Because we got this jutlaha we already had. Now we're getting a kawana, but it's in a slightly different form. We'll check Carrie's work to see if it's in there. So we'll go up to na. So here's adekunana, send them there. Adekwana, I'm trying to send them there. Adekwana, kachwana. You akayanak. So this is the form that I think is pretty close, although we'll take a look and see how different it might be. Yeah, akuwanak. Pretty close. A little different, but pretty close. Cha'ayikdeyu akawanak. So he sends or and you yik inside of a boat, even an unfinished boat. Cha'ayikdeyu akawanak. He commands them to go inside to this in the boat. Okay. Next reader. Sheesh. What do we got there?
Chip in my canoe.
And yeah, so chipping wood, you could also say adds in my canoe, right? Because chut'a is an adds. And this is a command form of a verb. So sometimes a verb, if it's both zero group classifier and zero conjugation, sometimes it's only the root. Like if I'm going to tell you to eat it, cha. If I'm going to tell you to adds it, chut. And so that's a command. Chut. Gook, chut. Okay. Ask questions if you got them. Just going to keep rolling along. Who wants to read this one? Sheesh. So this would often be katatuk, but because there's ka right in front of it, that causes this to contract to just a KD. So you end up with kak-tatuk. It almost reads like one word. And that's just something you're gonna have to get used to. Like they'll say, Atyahaik Shahid. They are drawing a picture, right? And so sometimes this happens, right? Or draw a picture. Okay, so what do you guys think? What do we got here?
When he goes inside it.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where we weren't sure. We like something bites on him, but now I think it's, you know, we couldn't figure out the bites on him.
Okay. Do ka, so that's on him, yeah, on top of. And let's just, again, go into the verb dictionary, see what we could find. So we're gonna look up talk, go down to the A's. So we get right there. So we're gonna look up this, but then there's a plus D on there, which is interesting. To bite, to bite on, to grip, right? And let's go look up bite and see what we find. So we've got talk, talk. Gotta get ready. It's gonna happen. So this is more, I think of it as well, a mosquito bite, but also like biting with the front teeth. But that's also, they'll use this one for chewing on gum as well. But Yéil was really like back to biting really hard. Shark bite, different kind of bite. Biting itself to get the fleas off, like see a dog like turn real quick and start biting on their own fleas. And bite or to grip onto. So this is a little different, right? So instead of sort of biting or nibbling with the front teeth, this is like to really clamp onto something. The mink is biting hard on my hand. Ouch. That's what that little baby ermine want to do with me. Want to bite me bad. I was just trying to get him off the trap. Okay. So yeah, it is to really chomp down, to bite down on something, right? And so we can, I'll give you my theory on why it goes plus D. Because it doesn't have a mouth. It's this magic canoe that goes chomp like that. It's a big trap. It's like a Venus flytrap canoe. He's got it. It doesn't. So yeah. So it. How about this one?
Jak we do cake.
Sheesh. And what do you got here?
He kills him regularly.
Mm-hmm. Oops.
His nephew.
Right, and so like, then there's you can pluralize this, but you'll see that kinship, sometimes they don't have to pluralize, right? Because, and it's a little bit morbid, but you know, the way the story goes is a kid is born and he kills it. It's not like if you put them all in the canoe, then that would probably be a huss right there. But this is a repetitive form, right? So he's killing them. So I could say, "Ach, ach dushi, my cat kills mice," right? And that's what she does. And so this is a repetitive form, like it happens on a regular basis. And so this is what he's doing.
So can I ask a question? So before you get to the rest of the story, you know, it's like nephews rather than nephew. Tell me again why this is nephew rather than nephews. I mean,
Yes.
nephews rather than nephew, sorry.
Yeah, so we get a repetitive thing here. So this tells you it's happening repeatedly.
Oh, that's right. It kills them regularly. Yeah,
So
got
this
it.
is saying every time a nephew is born,
Yeah.
he kills it.
Yeah.
There was this group of his
That's why it was confusing to me, because when we figured out it was kills regularly, I'm like, kills regularly. Yeah, but anyway.
and there's several different versions of this story. And so and you'll see different storytellers focus on different components. It's got a pretty violent beginning. Káak had a wife, and for whatever reason, he was worried that his nephews would grow up and mess around with his wife. I don't know why. But then whether it was a boy, he'd always ask, was it a boy? But then it didn't matter because he'd just have it killed. And in some of the versions, like he'd send his slaves over and his wife was in on it. She would be checking on them to see if, and his sister, she would just be lonely. And because she was lonely, nobody touched her. She was just lonely. She'd have a baby. These are spiritual beings. They just work differently. So she'd just have a baby and then the baby would get killed all the time. And this keeps happening. So it's a pretty rough start to the story. But yeah, that's sort of where we're getting to. So some of this stuff, like once you know the stories too, like then it helps to put the pieces together. And then sometimes the pieces are there and you got to sort of do a little bit of logic work to figure it out. Say, well, this keeps happening, but there's only one. So it could be like, you know, the nephew just keeps coming to life and coming back, but that's not happening in this story. Right? Okay, well, we'll take our break at killing nephews. And again, this is a violation of the highest order, right? We know that. This is the uncle's supposed to raise the nephew, right? So there's a lot to analyze with these stories, like right off the bat. You're like, the world is just totally messed up. Everything's just really messed up because this is happening. And in other versions, like, not only does he command the tide, everything on the world is scared of him because he says to them, I'll just flood the whole world then. So they're all scared. They're all scared he's going to flood the world. That's why everything was doing everything he said. Then he had these plans, these ways of killing his nephew. But we'll see. Raven's coming and he's going to help. Okay, take 10. We'll come back at 9:45. Okay. Any thoughts or questions as we go through, keep going through this? Okay. Let's see. I'm trying to move this down a little bit. Okay.
You know what? I think I've been talking and can you hear me okay?
Uh-huh.
I think my mic was set to the wrong thing, so when I never mind.
Sounds a lot better now.
Man, I don't think anybody's heard anything I said so far.
I bet it was great, profound.
It was fun. It really was, man. I'm sorry that you guys missed it.
It's all right. You want to read this next line?
Yeah. Agawa wanani so wait. Oh wait. Yes, you do a sagu at do each studliha. Studliha.
Yeah, oh, astutely, huh? All right, what did you guys come up with for this part?
I can't recall aga away. Aga away.
You guys ever see that dumb movie?
Is that like continuing on in a story?
Yeah. That's how I translate that. Just like that movie where the guy's like, she says, and then.
Yeah.
Literally. What's that?
Is it, dude, where's my car?
Dude.
Yeah.
Probably doesn't.
And that
We'll see. So aqa is literally like going after it, like, going to get it. But aqa'awa, it's just a little time jump in your story. It's really good to know how to use it. It's really helpful for telling stories. It's just saying, and then, what about wan nisawe?
it's like what? Is that like what's happening? Like almost like wasa ya'adnanin?
Wasa atnanin would be like what is happening. So you'd have to get but it's sort of close to that. It's kind of probably pulls itself from that a little bit.
I see it's asking somebody for something anyway. No?
Well, it could be a form of a question. And so there's two ways that I would say this could be translated. If it's asking a question, then we could say, at what point? And this is just sort of a special construction used a lot for storytelling. I don't know if I froze or when, but I would probably say, I would usually translate that as this. At some point, or at which point, at what point. These do very similar things. Aqa'awe and wananisawe. I would say aqa'awe is more like a little time jump. Well, and then this thing, and then this thing. Wananisawe is usually like we're introducing some new component into the story at some point. Or we're just jumping way ahead, like I'm telling some story and his boat broke down and he was stranded on this island. Well, at some point, this other thing happened, right? So it's just saying some indefinite amount of time later. That's really what this is, a narrative device. Very good to know how to use, very good to just look for, watch how storytellers are using it. You could do a sagat.
When I see that, I think of that, this thing's name is Raven.
Mm-hmm. Do each chutlaha.
Did he send himself?
And then we'll just say to them, to him or her, right? So you could say, ach it shchut laha. They sent themselves to me. Do it shchut laha. I sent myself to them, right? So that this ach it, do it to a person. This is the same it you'd use as ach it itishe, right? Here's your kiskokek again. Oh, someone want to read that? I skipped right over that part. If you haven't read yet, it's a great time to read.
Before that, really quick, after the do eat ha, is there the question mark?
Oh,
Would it,
yeah, so these,
is it just automatic because of the loss away made it a question?
because you could say, do it like that, right? I would say this one could go either way with a question mark, because it's sort of like an open-ended, like a storytelling device. Sort of like if you were telling some story, and then what did he see there? He saw a little ermine in the mousetrap, right? So even though it's asking a question, it's like a open, it's again, more of a storytelling device, how to get to the next thing. So I go back and forth on how I take care of the, usually I would probably say, you've got two choices and both of them are correct. And then at what point did this thing called Raven send himself to them? Right? And again, the English, it's just a little bit awkward. The Tlingit just, they're different languages, right? But you could also say, and then at some point, that thing called Raven sent himself over there. I think either one's totally fine. But as far as what it's doing for meaning, saying sometime later, Raven sent himself there to this person. Now we're going to get who that person is.
Sorry, one other quick question. When I say the thing called Raven, when you're translating, could you say like the one called Raven, the one we know is called Raven, or something like that to make it sound less like the thing called Raven? Like Raven is a.
Yeah, that's a good question. If it said, you do a sagu right? And so these are some things as well. Like it's just kind of interesting where you have choices to make. I would probably lean towards ut because ut is a thing. And even though it sounds a little bit, you know, like it just sounds a little strange or disrespectful in English. Like, but same with like, I've heard speakers say, wait, and even though we're all in the same room, like if you ask me a question, I say, ask that one. You'd be like, whoa, that one? What about that person? But that's what you say in Tlingit. So this thing called Raven, but also because when we go back this far, what this is probably telling you is this isn't just a bird that's Raven, because we're going to get it with another thing, I think. It's this thing that we call Káak. And so it could be doing some things like these are these capital letter characters in this story and not just, you know, not just the bird. As important as that bird is, there's the capital R Raven too. So it could be doing any number of these things.
It does kind of seem like he's alluding to something more than just a bird.
Right. Because this something as well, like it's sort of like in English when you said, like, if you were to say, it's really something, right? Like it's different than something's over there. So it's a context thing as well. Because if you said, literally that's saying something is really something. But what you're really saying is you're saying there's something in that that's special. it's an interesting, you know, there's all these interesting layers as we just unpack more and more about Tlingit and see how the language works. But yeah, and then as we translate, because if you didn't know Tlingit and you read this, they're like, why do they call Raven a thing? Raven's like the hero, the big trickster, the big, you know, what, but this just happens. Ah.
I'll read.
Sheesh.
Yukis kukech wedud locked shudliha.
Sheesh. What do you guys think? So there's Yukis kukech. What does this part do?
Sent over to his sister.
Yeah, so it's saying Yukis kukech, his sister, he sent himself to her. Now this, you don't see this very much at all. This is a master storyteller, so they could do what they want. But if I were you, I would do that. Oops. And we'll talk about that later. But the old speakers, they could do what they want, right? He sent himself to his sister. And it's really interesting too, the way that there's all these third person everythings, right? So there, as you're translating this, like, you just got to keep those things straight in your mind. And the more you speak Tlingit and listen to Tlingit and think in Tlingit, you won't get tangled up. It's the English that gets you tangled up. Like English, I think, really wants to have clear separations of who we're talking about. Now that person's sister, now this one. But Tlingit, it just gets really fluid with this stuff.
Yeah, because I kind of thought it was he sent or his sister sent for him, you know, couldn't get the sense all right. Yeah.
Right. And so it's really interesting because then, but it's the way that Tlingit starts using names and stuff. Raven, he sent himself to them, right? So
Yeah.
once they name Raven, we know that's the one who's doing the thing, right?
Yeah.
This is kind of how this works. And then we say, oh, that Yokisko Káak, his sister that we already talked about, he sent himself there. So now we know that still is Raven though, right? And it'll do one of these away or something. But then sometimes it does just sort of switch who we're talking about, like it does right here. Okay, who wants to read this one?
Achnuchawe do lock and lock. Do yadi da de.
What do we got?
She's always crying. His sister's always crying.
Mm-hmm. Do yeti da de.
I forgot what we got for da de, Kusin.
Her child was all I got was her child of, and I couldn't find that day.
Okay.
And we tried, we looked.
Yeah.
So, oh, go ahead.
It's about her child, like a dot.
Yep.
Oh,
So
without
da on its own is around or about. Same word, two different meanings. You will hear this as dot. A lot of times they'll say dot. A dot, but it gets the day on there probably because like she's always crying because these things keep happening to them. And so you might expect like da in some cases as well, but you know, you have some options, right? If it's a future thing, like you could say a da de like if you know it's going to be a real sad movie and you cry at sad movies, but you want to go see it anyways, I'm going to cry about that, right? So that's the day could sort of, because these aren't just space, they're also time, right? And then there's interesting decisions, right? You could say duyetki, you could pluralize that, but you know, about, and you could also say about her child. You got decisions to make. And so like, it was fun to sort of analyze this stuff. And when we would translate that, these things would always come up. Like Richard Downhoward would spend like 20 minutes saying, well, this is, you see, the Yeti is a single child. And so that's, we should be saying, she's always crying about her child. And so that's what we'll do. And then Nora would be like, no, it's her children, right? So she would always just come in and just sort of give him the fluent speaker interpretation of things. But we'll see, like you could say it that way, duyetki, but you know, duyeti. But again, it probably comes back to single child gets killed and it just keeps happening. It's a sequence of things. So it could be a bunch of advanced stuff going on under the hood. Who wants to read?
And then he stood by her, or he went to her.
Or you could say, so he went to her, this man. So I think we covered there's chach and asaweh. There's a couple of kind of complicated things going on in here. This is really sort of saying it was really, right? And so there's cha, which is you see, at the ch, I'm not exactly sure what it's doing on there. Asaweh is a and se and we. And so all these things are combining to say like, it really was shach. So the reason why I think this storyteller would be doing that is because there's two distinct versions of this story. In one of them, a killer whale comes up to her. The other thing that I think happens is some people interpret shach as a crane, like it's a type of bird. But shach is not really a crane. So what is shach?
You mean it's not a heron?
It absolutely is a heron.
Oh, okay. That's what we have. Yeah. So yeah, actually it was a heron who went by her side.
And we might sort of do this type of thing. Yeah, by her side, went to her. So the khan is literally like right next to. So you could say by her side, that's totally fine. But it also, that's how you say going to see someone, to visit them. So, you know, if we're in this Tlingit speaking universe, I'm going to see my friend, right? So that's what the khan does, visiting, seeing, being with. Okay. Who wants the next one? Cruising right along.
Lachyu to a sagu at.
It's Cheesh. And what do we got for that?
Heron, we called it.
Mm-hmm. So we say it's a thing we call heron. Right? Okay, let's keep it going. Unless you got questions, let's just keep it going. Catch a rhythm.
Dasaya dade Káak.
Okay. What do we got?
What you're crying about?
Mm-hmm.
You always add good emphasis.
Cheers.
Who wants it?
Ha akyadi awe. Tle a uwade awe. Tlewa ak ich awe ujak.
Jeesh. So let's go line by line. Ha, achyedi awe.
Like, yeah, this is my son.
My son or
Or
oh,
child. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Yeah, child.
my child.
I don't know where son came from. It's my Dagani.
You were thinking nephew in advance.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it is sons, right? And so,
Yeah.
and again, that is a singular form, but there's nothing wrong with saying, like when we did this with the elders, they said children because they know the story and they know what's going on. But even though she might be just sitting there because one of her kids just got killed, right? It's a traumatic story. It's wild stuff. We'll say child for now, but I will say this kid is, when the translation comes out in the Raven book, this will probably say children. Depends if they decide to change it. Okay, what about this line?
The thing was able to get around still.
Oh, wuwadi.
I was thinking like wuwadi ka.
Yeah, there's a wuwadi. You can say wuwadi ka. But what is going on with this verb? What is this telling us?
Like somebody intelligent, somebody experienced. No.
Growing up. So you can say,
yeah.
What? So this is how you could talk about like Anchorage. I was born in Skagway. I grew up in Anchorage, right? And so again, what this I is doing at the end is saying when, verby, when this verb, when something, technically saying when something grows up. Again, there's some things are being used here. It's really interesting. But I would say when one grows up. What do we got?
My brother keeps killing.
Then my brother keeps killing it every time.
Right, kills it, kills him, right? There's different ways. That's a third person right in there. So ujak is different than jak, right? And so we had a jak earlier, like this is just saying like, and the difference between the CH and the underline X, and it depends, like this underline X and the U and the K are the same modes, right? So they enter differently depending on the conjugation type. So, but this means on a regular basis, like what I would be saying here is like, my cat kills mice. She just does it. That's what she does, right? She's a mouse killer. But then if I said every single day my cat kills a mouse, this is like every single time. Another example would be I eat cornflakes, but every single morning or wash or whatever the thing is, king salmon collars, whatever the thing is, I'm eating every single time. That's what I have for breakfast every day, right? So then they're just a little bit different, slightly different, regular basis, all the time, okay? The CH is just specifying who does the thing, okay? And so we get it again, slightly different, but let's do both of this. So who wants to read this one?
Hey, ach, ich, away, jak, kach nach sating.
Okay. Sheesh. What do we got here?
My brother killed him there.
Oh, hills them. I'm going to say when. That's how I'm going to take care of the kla right here. Because kla, this verb, that verb. So when that verb happens, Káak nachsatin. What do we think about that one?
Can we talk about Noxatine?
Mm-hmm.
Because that one was like, let him become a man, or not, you know, Noxatine, let it be, you know, let it become, let it be.
Right.
That was the only thing, you know.
So yeah, let's go look that verb up. We're going to look this up in Carrie's work. So we'll go down, we'll close the na, we'll go down to T. There's a million of these verbs. So we're going to look for city. So here's kudzati, be a certain way, to be or to become. So this is the one, right? To become this thing. So as we go through, we usually hear it like this, right? So with kakwantan city, kuatlitu city, wusity, like you're talking about the time when it became this certain thing. Guchsati, it's gonna become. Nachsati, let it be. This is what Raven would say. Like people come up, try to come to his house, it'd say, Techas nachsati. Let him become rock, and then they turn to stone. I think we're actually seeing something a little bit different than that. And it's kind of close to this, but a little bit. And so what that N is doing is just taking it kind of a little bit one step further, not quite like this one. And so, but maybe something a little bit closer to this, you know, so I'm not exactly sure what the mode is, but I'll tell you what it's doing. So what the N is doing there is saying when they would, right when they became a man, he would kill them. And so this, so there's a couple things like atwati. So it's when it's grown, he always kills them. He kills them right when they become a man. So that's what the nachsatin is doing. It's saying when this thing happens, this other thing, that's when he does it. Okay, pretty advanced sort of form. There's some stuff going on in there I'm not exactly sure about, but I know how to look at it and how to interpret it. Okay. Anybody not read in a while? Anybody only read once? You gotta read more than once. It's good stuff. Huh.
So why Yéil Yao Sakha you ik shanya teye kwan dak kate kadedugo a.
Okay. Okay. We'll just capitalize this guy again. So let's take this first part. Yao Sakha. What do we got there?
Aaron is going to talk to her.
Right. So in this case, so what does the achaway do? What do you guys think?
Therefore, because of it.
Yeah, because of it, or that is why, because of that. You've got, you know, it's usually gonna be one of those two things, right? So usually it's like this thing happens, that's why this other thing. This thing happens because of that, this thing. So this is another really good thing to learn how to use, right? we konedea achakach lechet at joe tatin teslach tua ushko gandechagudi. I'm scared of monsters. That's why I want to go out at night when it's dark, right? Káak.
Have you ever heard it in a way of being used as like, that's how it is? Kind of like that's the achoe.
Yeah, and so, but, and again, these are like, it's not about right and wrong. It's just about like, how do we interpret these things? Because you could say, shukach dachoe uhan achoe shukach adi yuchatu wasak.
Okay.
We are from shukach. That is why people call us shukach adi.
I
So,
see.
sometimes people do get like in these debates where it's like, we're actually debating, we're saying the same thing, you know, like,
Yeah.
so like, well, achoe is actually, it's like, okay, fine, you know, but
I was just wondering if I was using it the wrong way.
that's right. It's just sort of like getting a little bit more into like how it works. So that's why I say that is why, because of that, is either one is how I would sort of look at it. So it's usually saying, so she says this, right? He keeps killing my kids when they grow up. That is why. And then we're going to take a look at this. How is this working? The Yao Sakha. What do you guys think? Let's just look at the verb. What about the Yao Sakha verb? What kind of thing is that doing?
No.
Not quite. Yao Sakha.
Oh, to say it? To want
Yes.
something? To say something?
To say a certain thing, right? So now we're going to get these, this one, he said this, right? And so, and then, so Yao Sakha and Yawaka. So there's some subtle differences in here. Like we already talked about a kawanik, like told the information. Like they told me that there's a ku'ich, right? They told me that. But that's just all about the information. Kaushanik, they told me that story, right? Talked to me. But that's all I'm saying. They talked to me. Told me information, told me a story, talked to me. They told me these words. And this is really important in Tlingit, because sometimes you need to say, well, we're mad at them because they said this. They said our clan house belonged to them. Now we got to fight, right? So, but the Yao Sakha could be something good too. It could be a promise. It could be a bunch of different things. But the ush, anybody know what the ush is doing here?
Like let's?
Not quite.
Isn't Osh like it's like a third person object, like the guy, the gal?
That one we've been talking about, right?
Right. Yeah.
So, and it kind of like, who gets to be the ush? If it's a Raven story, first off, it's probably Raven. Second off, if they start talking about somebody a whole bunch, like they're talking about this sister an awful lot, that's why the heron said to her, right? Because she's the one who's crying. He walks up to her. She says that. And he's like, why are you crying? My brother's killed my kids. That is why Heron said this to her, or said it to her. Like there's different ways to look at that. But it's really setting up a quotation, right? And then in stories, sometimes we get these really important things. Like they said these words. That's what the ka is doing there. The difference between Yawaka and Yao Sakha is Yawaka doesn't have an object on there. Just they said this thing. They said Yiguayachwan, right? That's part of the story. Yao Sakha has an object. And in this case, that is who was being told the thing. Yao Sakha. They told you. Yao Sakha, right? You need to chew out your kids sometimes. Yao Sakha. Tatayite nagu. Ketach edis achoa. I told you go to bed. You didn't listen to me. That's why you got no video games right now. This is a true story from today. Our day at our house. Okay. So now we're going to get to the thing that he says. How about you ik shanyate?
The beach, that beach. But I'm not sure what Shanya Tei is.
Okay. Let's see what we can find. It might be in here. Now. I thought maybe I had it. Shun. Like, I got it.
Yeah, if you find it, good luck, because I looked in everything, but doesn't mean anything.
The old rocky face. I don't know.
Okay, well, I guess I got to put that one in there now. It might really only be, well, I would think people would use it, but we'll see.
So it's not the old rocky face.
So sha is a head. Nya is sort of in the vicinity of or shielding. It depends how it's being used. And then te is a rock. So what this is, and this is a hard one. Like this is, you're not going to find this all over the place. So what I'm going to say is I'm going to say ik shanyate, that low tide stone.
Oh.
So I'll have to put that one in there. That one's, it's pretty specific from this story. There's quite a few different storytellers who say this. So it's like a stone, like the beach head around rock. It's kind of how you can put the parts together.
It's like those rocks that are over by that beach going over toward Chilkoot from the ferry terminal. Is that the ones where it's low tide and you can see that big old rock formation?
Some of those, if it gets pretty big, it starts getting in the each territory. But this would be, I would think of it as a rock that the tide can go over, right? It's just, it's there. It's there,
Okay.
it's at the tide line. It's more like what it's talking about. Okay. What about dak kate?
Inland from the shore.
Mm-hmm.
The one that was inland from the shore.
Well, what about the kate?
That one that, I don't know. That
Okay.
one that was inland from the shore.
Put it on it.
Let's go in here.
Like yente.
What's that?
That ka is like yente. It's like to put it down or to pick up, but ka is on, so it's put on it.
So like, I'll show you I think that it's in here in a different form. Dujit kate. Give them the round object. This would be an apple. This would be a rock, a roundish rock. This would be an egg, a basketball, right? So this is something, again, like we'll start to recognize these things, some of these patterns. So like the carrying verbs, right? There's a round thing, there's an abstract thing, we'll take a look at those, getting too late in the evening now, but we'll look at those on Thursday. I'll show you some examples of that. Oops, I go back to the same spot. Hold on. So then when that shows us the kate, when we carry something, there's usually some direction thing. And this is inland, but this is, we were talking about this today, some of these complexities. Niche is the beach, but that's just sort of saying it as a noun. To say going to the beach, you have to decide if you're coming from the inland or from the water. And when we say inland, we're not saying like from Teslin, we're just saying from upland from the ocean, right? So we got to remember, if we're starting up on the land, if we go towards the ocean, we're going ik day. And then we get there, then we're on the niche. But then if we want to get in a boat and go out in the water, then we're going dock day. Then if we want to turn around and go back to the beach, we go yun day. So we had ik, niche, dock, yun. Now if we get back onto the niche and we want to go back up home, we're going to go dock. So dock day. So in this case, dock kate. There's a bunch of like sort of embedded information here. So shanyateyi is a brock that's kind of below the tide line. So once you say dock kate, that's a command form. And I would probably say, bring it up. But the up means bring it up the beach. And then the last one for the night is kataduku ah. What do you guys think about that? There's a few tricky ones in here.
That was one of them.
So I can tell that is a verb, right? So there's the ka thing on there. There's a declassifier. There's a root with a suffix on there. So I'm going to look for Duke. So I'm going to look up Duke and see what I can find.
It makes me think of that word for balloon, kadaukuat.
Oh yeah, it sounds a little similar, right? So I'll go down to the D, to the Tlingit. So we got E, A, U, Duke, Duke. So here we get closed, plugged up, become whole, come together. And so that's getting kind of interesting. So we're gonna take a little bit of a deeper dive into a different document. We got 1 minute to get there. So another kind of advanced document, if we're not finding something, we go into Jeff Lear's verb notes. These are all written on these legal pads. We're going to go down to the D. These are all by verb root. We're going to go to DU, and then we'll see Duke, and we go up a little bit. Again, like handwritten cursive notes, a little bit kind of tough to sort of look through. Become whole, solid, healed up, closed up, plugged. This verb has a bunch of different things. Like if there's a hole and that hole got sealed up, not corked, sealed up, that would be Duke. This is your skin is also Duke. If you get cut and your skin heals, that's also this. But as far as a rock goes, when they told us about this, Duke, go find a solid rock. It's solid. It's solid. Like if you just, sometimes you pick up a rock on the beach and be like, it's kind of like, it's gonna break apart. It's made of shale and stuff. Like if I were to just throw this, but if you pick up a rock and you could feel that it's just solid and tough. That's what he was telling her to look for. So it's a pretty advanced sort of thing, and we get it right up here. Katiduk is whole, solid, one piece, has no hole in it. So this is sort of, if we're not finding it, I like to go to the Verb Dictionary, then I go into these notes. And you know, it's a different thing because it's not a book. It's like just flipping through these pages. A wonderful work by Jeff Lear. James Crippen scanned them for us. They're at the Alaska Native Language Center up in Fairbanks. And this has more verbs in it than I think the Verb Dictionary has. And they both have more than the database has, but the database has them all laid out for us in all these different ways to say it. So last of the night, he says, go down, find a low tide rock that's solid. Bring it up here. Okay. Sheesh, this is the big stories, you know, so you guys are getting like a really awesome amount of it, a really, really awesome amount. And so when we worked on these, we had like whole rooms full of elders, and we were all like that too. There'll be some parts of it I'll share with you what it was like when we were translating this stuff, and it was fun. It was a lot of fun. It's gonna sheesh. We'll see you folks on Thursday. I'm gonna try and fix my internet. See what I could do.
Ganesh Chish.
Sheesh.
Yéil question.
Yéil question.
Sheesh.
Check this one out. Kune.
Oh yeah, that's Kashlawashi.
Kashlawashi.
That's got a hole in it. That ain't cut to Duke at all. But maybe it's a tool.
I found it like that though, and I picked it up, and they all went.
Like stuff came out of
I
it?
didn't even know it was like that.
Whoa. That one might have been bored through.
Yeah, I mean you can.
Like it was used for something.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. That's worse.
Well, I can see it.
Yeah, you can see where it was notched out.
See, so that you could say, "Kaududle wash." Someone made a hole in it. People made a hole in it. So that's what they say when they drill holes in things like that hellebore when you don't want to get turned to stone.
It's something I had to went around both sides like that though, because there's like a notch here.
Mm-hmm.
There's a notch here.
Maybe like a weight for a fishing line or something.
That's what I'm thinking. It looks exactly like a weight for a fishing line.
Yeah, going up.
Yeah.
Yep.
This way.
Like a net, especially like a qewu tei. Like maybe.
So I will share.
Cool.
That's pretty awesome. Christine, no, she's gone. I was trying to get her on another call here. You're probably getting ready for dinner, so I better not hold you up, man.
Yeah, well, let's set up a
But
chat.
I did find that audio.
Oh, rocking. Okay.
I found the original. I'm trying to get copies of it now.
Okay. We'll do some late night sessions here.
That would be awesome, man.
All right, bro.
To Yéil Christine. What?